Welcome to the first Wild Meta Snapshot breakdown of the Tempo Storm Hearthstone channel. After our previous video featuring the 5 Kings of Wild, we would like to showcase how the meta has adjusted since the start of Kobolds and Catacombs through a release of Wild Meta Snapshot number 13. With time for the meta to settle, there have been some power shifts in the wild. This may be difficult to see at first glance as 4 of the 5 top decks remain the same from the last meta snapshot. At the time, there were 3 decks that were clearly dominating the latter: Reno Priest, Cubelock, and Aggro Paladin. As the meta evolved, decks slowed down significantly and Aggro Paladin has fallen out of popularity. We are entering the first control meta that the Wild ladder has experienced since the start of the Tempo Storm meta snapshot. Reno Priest remains top dog, but is only the best by a few hairs as Cubelock is giving the deck a run for its money. The Highlander archetype still reigns, only losing to a few decks that can combo or high-roll large threats in the mid-game, like Cubelock's Voidcaller into Malygos, or decks that use Naga Sea Witch and Giants. With the meta slowing, Reno Priest now runs more draw cards and has been seen running Velen alongside Spawn of Shadows to burst down druids that are running Mass Armor Spellgate. Overall, the deck is the most consistent on the ladder and can win games out of nowhere with Raza on 5 and Anduin on 8. Its win rate has actually increased with the rise of Cubelock, as decks that tech against control Warlock archetypes tend to do quite poorly against Reno Priest. Cubelock has really shown its vibrance over the course of the past few weeks, with its ability to cheat out large demons on turn 4 and 5, and the effectiveness of AoE removal options such as Defile and Hellfire. This deck is the centerpiece of the major meta shift, putting aggro on the back burner and allowing for the rest of the ladder to become fairly greedy. The rise of Cubelock has even inspired an offshoot deck that runs the Naga Sea Witch and Giants package, along with powerful demon synergies, plus rarely seen cards like Sense Demons and Sacrificial Pact. As of now, we consider this Rising Giant archetype the flavor of the week under the umbrella of Cubelock, but if the deck persists, it may become its own archetype in future meta reports. Big Priest has not particularly changed much since the last meta report, only adding a few tech cards to take advantage of the slower meta. Ysera has made a comeback as an additional threat in the deck that generates extra value. However, if the meta was to speed up again, we assume that this would be the first card to go. Aggro Druid is now the premier aggro deck on the ladder, mostly due to the fact that it is favored in most aggro matchups. The deck does well against greedier lists and keeps the meta from spiraling out of control, but the deck struggles against the Reno Priest and Cubelock duo. With Jeeves allowing for the deck to have refill after dumping its hand, and Sir Finley Murgleton giving you access to a more aggressive hero power, the deck can sneak out wins if it can avoid Reno Jackson or a mid-game Void Lord. The final deck in Tier 1 is a new inclusion, Malygos Otk Druid. In the slower meta, players are taking advantage of this archetype to counter Reno Priest. The Aviana, Kuhn, and Malygos burn combo is effective against greedier control decks and more consistent than the current top decks of the ladder. The deck is traditionally weak to aggro, even with Spreading Plague and the Oaken Summons package with Ironwood Golem to contest the board. However, the slow meta allows this Malygos Otk Druid to really shine. The most important tech card introduced to the deck is Poison Seeds from the Naxxramas set. This card allows you to clear large boards of demons, but more importantly, transform them into treants, denying the big late-game swing turns from N'Zoth or Bloodreaver Gul'dan. With the meta so slow yet resilient against aggro decks, combo decks have started to come out to play. Innerfire Combo Priest is in a good position as it is the fastest combo deck that currently exists in Wild, and can occasionally lethal opponents from 30 HP on turn 5 with Deathlord, Radiant Elemental, and Divine Spirit Innerfire. However, it can be countered by having their early minions removed, leaving the deck to rely on some of its secondary win conditions to win the game. The deck has some hidden burst potential with Auchenai, Circle of Healing, and Zombie Chow for 10 extra damage. That, in combination with random spells generated from Lyra, allow for the deck to cheese out wins out of nowhere. Some lists have started to tech in cards like Pint-Sized Potion to be able to steal Void Lords, and other minions with large health pools with Potion of Madness. While Aggro Paladin has suffered in recent weeks, the Anything Can Happen variant of the deck has gained some traction in this meta. The deck performs very similarly to its aggro counterpart, curving out with high-quality, low-cost cards like Shielded Minibot, Muster for Battle, Call to Arms, and Corridor Creeper. However, it also runs the Murloc package of Bluegill Warriors, Murloc Warleader, and Old Murky. all of which activate the explosive late-game damage of anything can happen. Where Aggro Paladin fails, this combo is favored in the Reno Priest matchup, and is not as terrible against Cubelock as the aggressive Paladin counterpart. However, you typically get outclassed by any other aggressive deck you run against, not to mention relying on a decent series of draws in order to capitalize on both the Murloc's early aggression and the turn 10 finisher of anything can happen. In this control meta, Cubelock really made an impact on the Wild format, cementing its place among the strongest decks the Wild ladder has seen. With upcoming balance changes hinted at by Ben Brode, the ladder tier list may change dramatically at any notice. Cards like Corridor Creeper and Patches seem overpowered in Standard, but they haven't been enough to prevent aggro from being overwhelmed in Wild by the new power levels of control decks. We on the Tempo Storm Wild Meta Snapshot team hope that these balance changes are implemented with the Wild experience in mind. Overall, this meta is one of the most interesting that has been around in Wild, since the meta is no longer centered on aggro and mid-range decks that rely on their curve to win games. Even formats as traditionally stable as Wild are seeing new decks and approaches challenging this control meta on a consistent, weekly basis. You can see some of these evolutions in the next Wild Meta Snapshot being released on the Tempo Storm website later this week. Innovative deck building and decision-making give players on the Wild ladder more of an edge than ever before. If you enjoyed this Meta Snapshot breakdown, leave us a like or favorite, and be sure to subscribe to stay tuned to all of Tempo Storm's news and upcoming Hearthstone content.